So there's been a lot of discussions about Usyk, and there's also been discussions about boxers retiring. So I want to give the boxing philosophy perspective. So let's open that door. So I'm going to explore 9 ideas. So idea number 1, Usyk has nothing left to prove on paper, undisputed at 2 weights. Now perhaps this is where the ego kicks in. Now I don't feel that Usyk has an ego problem, but I think he's committed. I think he's committed to his people. He wants to give them great nights and he wants to give them his passion. Now, from my perspective, the second Daniel Dubois fight was the perfect time to walk away at Wembley in front of 90,000 fights. And I think the Rico fight, I think it was a sign, or I think there was some reference points there that may indicate that Usyk, maybe being in decline is too much of a strong word, but he may not be as optimum as he once was. Idea number 2, the Rico curiosity. Now, I remember when Lennox Lewis retired, and before, I think the fight before he retired was he fought Vitaly Klitschko, brother to Vladimir Klitschko, and it was a very difficult fight for Lewis. Lewis got hit with a lot of punches. And I believe after that fight, he walked away. But more importantly, he never came back. So yes, he retired, but he never came back. Usyk, when he fought Rico, from my perspective, he didn't receive a beating, but a lot of people perceived that he was being outpointed. And again, even though Rico is a legendary kickboxer, at the time, I don't even think he was a ranked boxer. So this was absolutely astonishing. And we don't want to minimize Rico's performance, but it was a great performance. But when we look at Usyk, who has elite level ability and elite level execution, we definitely, none of us expected that. Idea number 3, the Rico fight proved Usyk was finished. Or did the Rico fight prove that Usyk was finished? Rico had some variables in that fight. There was the alleged phone call that Usyk had to one of his family members that's been spoken about in the media. And then there was the element of surprise that you couldn't really study Rico because all you had was the kickboxing tapes. And then you had Peter Fury, who I think was a crucial and very valuable member of the team in constructing the plan and creating an optimal boxing environment. The main concern for me was that Usyk at times just looked so disinterested. He didn't have that purpose, that intent. Also, the question has to be asked, was Usyk in great shape? Now, some people said he was in bad shape, but it's kind of hard to always look at a fighter and determine what shape they're in. And if he wasn't in good shape, can he regain that conditioning? Because, and I remember Shannon Briggs, I believe it was, who said this, part of what distinguishes Usyk from everyone else is his elite conditioning. So if he loses his elite conditioning, that's a big part of his weaponry. Rico was not the Vitaly fight. It wasn't a Vitaly fight. He wasn't getting hit with loads of punches and battered, but it was a reference and it was a warning. At the very least. Idea number 4, every reversed retirement has the same thing or describes the same thing. It's not boredom. It's a chemical adrenaline withdrawal. Usyk, like I said, I think he fights for his people, his tribe, and partly he fights for the world because I feel like a lot of us, we take a lot from a Usyk performance. From some of these performances that he's given have just been, they've been masterclasses, but there's also been an emotive element to them, particularly the second Anthony Joshua fight and the first Tyson Fury fight. And of course, it's hard to walk away, that adrenaline rush, because it's not just what you do for you. It's not just what you do for your team. It's also what you do for the world, the service that you give the world. And think of this, and I think this is just such an important point. Even if he overstays his welcome, even if he was to get beaten, he's still a legend. Usyk being a legend, that relationship is cemented, regardless of what happens. But boxers in general, they're always seeking the next hit, just like in someone who suffers from an addiction. Perhaps, instead of being judgmental, perhaps boxing writers and the boxing media need to have more understanding of this condition. Idea number 5, cerebral fighters aren't immune to that withdrawal. Usyk's identity as the smartest man in the room only means something with an opponent in front of him. So this is how I decipher this statement. It's like Usyk is a smart boxer, but just because he's a smart boxer doesn't mean that he can deal with the addiction that boxing brings. And sometimes the smarter you are, the more you can rationalize coming back. Because of course you can rationalize coming back. You inspire your people, you inspire the world, you make more money, you make more cultural impact, and it feels good. And the more you fight, the more you feed your team. There's a whole infrastructure that's based on Usyk. Every time Usyk fights, Usyk's team eats. Figuratively speaking, they get paid, and I'm assuming they get paid handsomely. So there's a multitude of reasons to carry on, not just personal reasons, not just individual selfish reasons, but there's reasons with regards to the team, there's reasons with regard to the passion, the service that he gives. Idea number 6, Dave Allen and Natasha Jones both said losing boxing meant losing their sense of self. In a sense, it's not just a job. Or if it is a job, it's a great job because it's part of your identity. Usyk's public identity exists in the ring. It's not just money, it's a part of who he is. Boxing is important to Usyk. And as I've stated previously, it's important to his people. It's important to the world. It's important to boxing. He's held in such high regard. Usyk's massive credibility, his massive respect has come from his achievements that have come from the ring. So in the boxing world, his respect is very, very high. Who would want to leave that? Who would want to leave? And I guess there's this other thing as well. You don't want to leave too late. You don't want to leave boxing too late because that's when you get hurt. But you also don't want to leave too early. And that in itself can psychologically affect a fighter because you could think, nah, I've got another great night in me. And I want to experience that. Because once you walk away, even if you try and come back, then it's even harder. So it's really understandable. And like I said, when we talk about it's more than losing a job, jobs have different meanings in different parts in the world. For example, in Japan, my understanding that in Japan, people treat their jobs with a very high regard. So I guess for Usyk, boxing is like a job in Japan. It's something that he's committed to. It's a major part of his life that he deeply respects. And he's given a large portion of his life to boxing. He's committed himself to boxing. So how hard is it? Imagine if you've committed your whole life to something and you've had all these successes and then you just are expected to walk away. That's a very difficult decision to make. Idea number 7, Eddie Hearn says 90% of his boxers don't earn enough money to pay tax. And Usyk, of course, is in the 1% where continued earning makes walking away financially irrational, even if it's physically wise. Remember, even if you're in the 1%, you have a small window to make lots of money. Now, the top 1% make a lot, but that financial window is very, very small. Plus, financial leverage leads to beyond food, clothing, and shelter. What do I mean by that? So, of course, when you're an athlete and you're an athlete of the highest level, you're looking to be able to provide yourself food, clothing, and shelter. Then you're looking to feed your family if you have a family. But then you'll have other aspirations, not just hobbies, but businesses. I believe that Usyk wants to build an academy. An academy, that's a huge financial investment. Even if it's just a time investment. time is still an investment. And of course, and this is different in different cultures, but you have the friend and family taxed. So if you're the one that's making millions, you'll have friends that will ask you for money for businesses or to help them out of a bad situation. And of course, you'll have family that will ask for money for various reasons as well. And all of that can be very difficult to manage. And the cultural expectations, they are different in different places. And the eighth idea is that boxing, there's no pension, there's no union, there's no aftercare system waiting for him. The sport is structurally built to keep elite earners fighting past their peak. Is this a problem? Clearly it is a problem. And it makes you think, is boxing an unregulated financial jungle? Is boxing educating fighters on finances? Does the culture of boxing encourage boxers to get financial education? And do promoters and managers have a duty of care to ensure that their boxers are financially literate? And when I say duty of care can be legal or ethical. Is there an ethical obligation of a duty of care, or is there a legal obligation of a duty of care? And remember, you can be financially literate. You can have a business degree, or you can have a master's degree in business, and you can still mismanage your money. I think people underestimate how hard it is to effectively manage large amounts of money. The bigger the pie, the harder it is to organize the slices. So Usyk is making a tremendous amount of money. But once he leaves boxing, of course he will still have the potential to make money, but he won't have the potential to make that type of money. He won't have the potential to make the 10 millions, the 20 millions, the 30 millions, the 40 millions. That window would be gone. Even if he's doing speaking engagements and he's making 50 grand, and that's great, but 50 grand isn't 20 million. So yeah, it does feel that boxing is an unregulated financial jungle, and it feels like the culture of boxing needs to change. And that probably is something that needs to happen in other sports as well, not just boxing. And then the ninth idea is that Bernard Hopkins fought at an elite level in his 40s. And Usyk, in his heart, in his spirit, he may not want to retire. He may feel in his heart that he can still operate at an elite level. And it's interesting because the mindset and the psychological strength of a person, it can empower you or it can blind you. And who is best suited to make the decision of when you should walk away? The natural reaction is to say the boxer would know. But is that true? Is it the boxer's trainer? Because in theory, he sees you every day. Is it the team? And even if you're in the gym and you're in preparation and things are not going well, I guess there's always this curiosity within the boxer. There's always this ego within the boxer, or there's this thing in the boxer that maybe they can recreate one magical night. It's just so, I guess the bottom line is that it's not easy to ascertain when to walk away. When you look at all the variables and you put all the variables on the table, it's really, really hard. Okay, so let's finish this with 7 questions. Question number 1. Has Usyk earned the right to continue, or was the second Dubois fight the perfect ending? For me, as an outsider looking in, 90,000 in front of Wembley, an absolutely spectacular performance. A performance that transcended his identity because it was a knockout as opposed to a decision win against a champion that was coming off a vicious, brutal victory over Anthony Joshua. To me, this would have been a perfect finish. However, the next best time to finish would be probably in his next fight. But that was a great, great moment. But Usyk may have other motivations in terms of fighting either at home or close to home. So from where we're standing now and looking at the Rico performance, that looked like the perfect time to end, but only time will tell. Question 2. Did the Rico fight expose physical decline, poor preparation, or simple disinterest? It may have been a combination of all those things. It's hard to talk about the physical decline because he still physically operated. And remember, he got the stoppage in the late round. So he still had that stamina. Was there poor preparation? It depends how we define poor preparation. Did he train hard? I think it's a byproduct of Usyk's personality to train hard, but perhaps there were distractions, perhaps there was politics, perhaps there may have been some minor injuries. There could have been a variety of things. So the poor preparation may not have been due to a lack of effort. And was he disinterested? It just, when he was in the pocket sometimes, he just looked like he just wasn't focused. Similar to AJ against Prenga. He just seemed to switch off. Maybe that was a psychological trick. I don't know. But there did seem to be some concerns there. Question number 3. Is Usyk still fighting for personal ambition or to give his people unforgettable nights? I think he's probably achieved everything personal. And I think a large part of his fuel, figuratively speaking, is the strength he gives his people. And I think he's so invested in that. I think he's so proud of that. And I think he's a man of integrity. That's how he comes across. So I think it's going to be hard for him to put that down. I know that his people look up to him and he probably feels a sense of obligation. Money is important until you've made so much money that it becomes not as important. So the cultural impact or the impact, the worldwide impact, I think that means a lot to him. So question number 4, can even a cerebral fighter like Usyk become addicted to boxing as adrenaline and identity? So can a cerebral fighter like Usyk become addicted to boxing's adrenaline and identity? I think so. I think when you have that type of success, when you're figuratively on the top of the mountain and you're looking down and you're just thinking, wow, look what I've accomplished. When you earn that level of respect, there's not many people in the world that have earned the level of respect that Usyk has earned. Imagine that adrenaline rush. Imagine that dopamine effect. You might not be able to put that into words. So the expectation that just because you're a cerebral boxer, that you can just walk away, that to me doesn't make rational sense. Matter of fact, being a cerebral boxer might make you want it even more. So I don't think his boxing IQ will increase. I don't know, does his boxing IQ have any bearings on him walking away? I think, assuming he has a good team and he has good people around him, you would hope that there would be a calculation of when to leave. But like I said, you don't want to leave no great nights on the table. It makes sense. Question number 5. Does Usyk risk retiring too late or walking away while he can still compete at an elite level? Of course he makes that risk. Every time he steps in the ring now, he has that risk of retiring too late. But risk is what makes great fighters great. And this is the problem. It's like when someone stepping in the ring is taking a risk, number 1. When he went up to heavyweight, that was a risk. When he went up against AJ, that was a risk. When he went up against Tyson Fury, that was a risk. When he did the Daniel Dubois rematch, that was a risk. The risks, in a lot of instances, is what makes great fighters great. But of course, there's the risk of retiring too late, but it's a byproduct of the game. It's part of the game because him taking risks is what made him legendary. And even if he leaves too late, he still retains his legendary status. Of course, I think many of us, because we look at Usyk with such high regard, we wouldn't want to see him get stopped or get beaten up. That would be a particularly distasteful scene to see. Question number 6. Is boxing's lack of pensions, unions, and aftercare encouraging champions to fight beyond their peak? This is an interesting one because this is a worldwide problem. Obviously, in the world, there's generally an inflation issue. But on top of the inflation issue and on top of the AI stuff, which I don't want to get into, most work now is 0 hour contract, or it's a contractor basis. And I guess boxing has been like that from the beginning. For boxing to have a pension and for boxing to have some type of infrastructure that protects boxers, well, someone needs to invest in that. And who's going to invest in that? Apparently, boxing has small margins of 15%. So unless the 1% that make the majority of the money are going to make that type of investment, then it's hard to see how boxing how can boxing be anything other than contract work, or what's the word? Yeah, contract work, 0 hour contract work. How can it be anything other than that if it has this type of financial infrastructure? Unfortunately, with boxing, you have the 1% that make the majority of the money and everyone else makes significantly less. I think that infrastructure is a problem. But the only people that could really change that problem are the people that have the most money and that have the most leverage. Question number 7. Can Usyk's mental strength extend his greatness or blind him to signs that his time is ending? Your mental strength is such an important factor. For example, I think of Rocky Marciano, the great Rocky Marciano, and I think a lot of his fights were won not just based on his Suzy Q, which for those that don't know was his powerful right hand. It was also based on the fact that he just wouldn't quit. He was just mentally a very strong individual. Now, the funny thing is, if you know anything about Rocky Marciano, he wasn't just mentally strong in the fight. He was actually mentally strong in preparation, because his preparation was vicious. Allegedly, he had these big punch bags that were bigger than his punch bag was bigger than any other punch bags that any other heavyweights at the time had. So he had a unique, excruciating camp that would prepare him to go to some very dark places. And he was a mentally strong fighter. Evander Holyfield, exceptionally mentally strong fighter. And again, another person who had elite conditioning. Yes, the conditioning was more modern and more science-based, but he had elite conditioning. That's why he took, I think they say it was 60 punches in 60 seconds against Riddick Bowe. And in his head, instead of thinking, he's hurting me, he's thinking, this is an opportunity now to really hurt Bowe. Again, he had exceptional mental strength. Even the fight with Mike Tyson, to overcome the intimidation and the physicality of Mike Tyson, it took mastery, but it also took that mental strength. And even taking that, I think it was that left uppercut against George Foreman, which he thought knocked his teeth out. It takes a lot of mental strength to be able to overcome things like that. So yes, Usyk's mental strength is overwhelmingly an asset, but it can also blind you to carry on too long. And when your time is done, it's not like you've got, like what they call it, like a stop clock. And then when your time is done, it goes beep. You and your team need to be able to make that assessment. So yes, that mental strength has been an overwhelming asset. It's what's made him great, but it could also enable him to mistime that ending. But like I said, even if he was to lose badly, he has still cemented himself as a legend. So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community, and that means I'm interested in your thoughts, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I'm interested in your observations. Now, if you want to support the channel, press like, hype, and subscribe. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.